Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. We're just waiting for William to join. So I just want to remind everyone, the guest that we'll be having today is William Bairamian. He is the editor-in-chief of the Armenite, and it's a guest that I've wanted to have for such a long time. I'm just waiting for him to join. It won't be too long. I also want everyone, just to remind everyone, to be like really respectful in the comments. And if, we want people to interact with us during this live. However, any comments that are disrespectful, we're going to be, turning off the comments or blocking the people. Hi, William.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Do you hear me well? Do you see me well?
Yes.
I think your camera is like flipped to the side.
Oh, should I turn it around?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
So
Good.
this has been a long time coming.
Yes, it has.
I'm very excited to have you. I mean, obviously I follow you on Twitter and, as many people do, and your voice has been just so important for the nationalist Armenians, and kind of really comforting to have on Twitter. And I just wanted to have this discussion with you and, touch base, because I really wanted your opinion and your take on certain things. And I think that everybody kind of wants to hear what you have to say about just everything that's been going on in Armenia in the last few months.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Perfect. So William, I wanted to know, you're so controversial on Twitter, and I know that your work goes far beyond Twitter, but and you're the editor-in-chief of the Armenite. So I wanted to know, talk to us a bit about the Armenite.
Yeah, my activity on Twitter, first of all, is more of a recent phenomenon. I actually didn't get as active on Twitter as I was on Facebook and some other platforms, just like regular article writing, until more recently. But as far as the Armenite is concerned, it's a publication that I launched in 2014. We're actually coming up on our 7-year anniversary.
Wow.
And it was something that I wanted to do for some time. I just didn't know what form I wanted it to take. And I was working for the ANC between 2011 and 2013 as the executive director of the Western region of the Armenian National Committee. And I felt like there was a missing voice in the Armenian community. I sensed that it was going in a direction that I felt was not conducive to preserving our identity, the unique identity that we have. And I thought that we needed to have a platform where that conversation could be had without having to worry about unnecessary censorship. So that's the story of the Armenite. That's how it started. If you look at the first few things that were published, I think you can get a pretty good sense of what direction I wanted to take it in. I think the first actual lengthy piece that I published was a translation of the Iron Ladle speech by Jeremian Haidik, which I realized that a lot of people know about and reference, but unfortunately haven't read. And one of
Right.
the reasons that I think a lot of people probably hadn't read it is that it is not readily available, unfortunately.
And
So I
how do we
went,
fix that? Like, how do we fix those problems? Like, I know a lot of people say the same things, like, we want to read this, but I've never really, heard about it, or wasn't available for me, or it wasn't translated in English. And how do we fix that?
I think a lot of times we get complacent with those sorts of questions. One thing that I learned a long time ago was that if you realize that you want or need something and it's not available and nobody else is doing it, then you have to do it yourself. So that's
And that's why you
uh,
started the Armonite.
that's really the only way of doing it. The Iron Ladle speech, for example, I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere online. Um, I'm not saying that it wasn't available.
You just couldn't find it.
I just couldn't find it, and I was able to find it in UCLA's library in a book that was falling apart. I mean, it was in a box actually because it was so fragile. And as I was taking the book into my hands, it was like the pages were crumbling. Um, so I was very careful, and I actually just took pictures of the pages so that I could translate it later on. But my point is that that's what it took. It took a trip to the university's library to find it in some book that nobody had seen probably in a decade or more, and taking it. And I'm not a translator, right?
Right.
That's not my area of expertise. But as with many translations that have happened in other periods, somebody just decided that it needs to be available
It
in a
needs to
different
be
language.
available.
And you know what? If I know there are people out there who have uh, criticized it, and that's perfectly fine. And there's nothing stopping them from taking the original text and translating it themselves.
You know what I've noticed, like especially on social media, you could do, the Lord's work and someone will criticize it. I mean, I said that the other day. I'm like, you could literally tweet, "I love my mom," and someone will be offended by it.
There's always somebody ready to be offended.
Right. And so I kind of fell on your account. I joined Twitter recently too. Like it's only since October. Before that, I was really not on Twitter. I was on Instagram a bit, but I joined it because of the Armenian tweetathon, and like we really wanted to bring,
Hmm.
Artsakh, recognize Artsakh and tweet at senators. And then I fell on your page and I was like, wow, so many of his tweets that I relate with, especially after November 10. And, it took like people went on either side, right? And you were the only person that I could really look to, one of the only people actually that I could really look to as to, okay, there's a person that has a voice for people that don't find this okay and they're not just okay with what just happened. So I wanted to touch base on that. I know we have a lot to talk about, so I want to get right into it. People took a stance, right? November 10th, either you were for Pashinyan or you were against Pashinyan. But I know from reading your tweets that you've always felt you were never a pro Pashinyan person. So, did I understand that correctly? And
Yeah.
if you weren't, I want to know what you saw in him that maybe a lot of us didn't see early on.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way of characterizing the split. Who was with him and who was against him after November 10th. One thing I would like to note, because I think it's important, is that during the 44 days of the war, I mean, one of the reasons why these people follow me on Twitter and even Facebook is because I was offering updates during that time, and a lot of people were following it, whether it was because of the translations or the analyses having to do with my knowledge about Armenian politics and the geopolitics of the region, or just knowing the people who are more familiar about those things than I am, and then translating whatever they had to say about the war and what was going on into English, and putting it on both Facebook and Twitter to make it available. But on November 10th, it was already clear what had happened, and I had no reservations about saying exactly what that was, which was treason, right? A large chunk of the Armenian homeland was given away. And when I say given away, I don't say that lightly. We know, based on several accounts, and not just, commentators sitting in their living rooms, as a lot of the critics like to say, people like Seyran Ohanyan, who are saying essentially that, uh, uh, you know, a city like Shushi was effectively given away, or there wasn't a
Right.
sufficient fight for it. Um, that is treason, right? When you have a large piece of strategic land like Karvajar given away to the enemy, um, endangering not just the existence of Artsakh, but also the rest of Armenia, that's treason. This is a legal definition. It's a legal definition that is accepted not just by um, Armenians, but by the international community, which is so important for so many people.
Right.
Uh, and there are a number of different reasons for why what happened was treason. But as far as my perspective on Nigol is concerned, uh, the reason why I saw what I did, is not some sort of secret. It's not the it's not the result of insider information. It's just a matter of knowing who this person is and who he has been for the past 20 years. And I've been doing this for over a decade now, and I've done a lot of research on him and other people and other parts of our history. And for the past 20 years, over the past 20 years, Nigol Pashinyan has been a deceptive, yellow journalist, okay, who has printed every manner of vile, um, misleading information that you can imagine about
Right.
people who are heroes, who are our heroes, and that's been adopted into the Armenian discourse as a fact. And I'm sure we'll get to talk about that a little bit, but this is a person who has said and done anything and everything that he could, okay, to put himself in the public eye and to eventually attain power. And
Right.
that's what he was able to do in 2018. And by that time, it was already clear who he was. For anybody who was paying attention, the fact of the matter is that I think a lot of people weren't paying attention to who he was, and it was difficult to withstand the wave of
Yeah.
excitement.
Yeah. I mean, I know for myself, I was pretty excited when, I heard about him, and I didn't know, I wasn't that deep into Armenian politics. And so honestly, in the last 2 years, I paid more attention to it, and I was like, oh, I see some good things that he was doing, obviously. But it, for me, it was like, I see how some people had a strong stance before November 10th, like against him. But I don't understand how people could still support him after November 10th. So it was like after November 10th, when we say it's treason, and I truly do believe that, what was a clear indicator other than the fact that we gave away our land? Like, I know that we say we surrendered Shushi. We know that we weren't putting up a fight. And what was something that was a clear indicator for you?
As to why it was treason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, what I mentioned about Karvajar, for example. Karvajar, a lot of people look at it as a part of Artsakh and just as a part of Artsakh, and this is one of the problems. But this division between Artsakh and Armenia, as though they're different things, they're not. Right? I've always considered Artsakh a part of Armenia and an indivisible part of Armenia. But you give a chunk. Let's say that they're two separate things. You give Karvajar, which borders, uh, Armenia proper, if you want to call it that.
Right.
The Republic of Armenia. Part of the water, for example, that comes to Sevan comes from Karvajar. What you're going to have now are, um, Turkish and Azeri troops stationed in or alongside the eastern border of Armenia, whereas you only had that and a longer border than you previously had, just along Tavush, and now you're going to have a much longer border to protect um, against a very powerful military force, as we realized. That is, and mind you, this is a part of Artsakh again, where not a single shot was fired. Okay,
Right.
it was simply handed over. Okay, there wasn't a single battle. Forget about a battle. I mean, not a single shot was fired there. There. I mean, how do you justify giving this piece of land, which has highly strategic importance, to the enemy, thus endangering not just Artsakh, but also uh, the Republic of Armenia? I mean,
Right. I mean,
how else do you explain that? What is that?
well, he obviously he was deflecting it, right? He was saying that these lands were sold a long time ago by the Nachkinner, and so he keeps bringing that up. And to anybody, kind of like any logical person would say, why did we go to war? Had these lands been sold in the last 30 years, why did we even go to war? Why did we have the need to have thousands of young men give their lives if we were going to lose, or if we didn't think we had a fighting chance?
But who said
Um,
we didn't have a fighting chance?
I don't. I think we did, but I'm saying he said that that's the reason why he gave it up, is to save our more soldiers' lives. Like, he didn't want to endanger any more soldiers. That we were not going to be able um to win this war. So,
So, I mean, if we want to take that logic, okay, we can either apply it to another situation. For example, the Nazis are attacking England, right?
right,
And they have a very powerful army, and it looks like they're going to win, right? So, if that's the case, why don't we just submit to the Nazis, hand over the land, and let them take over? Okay. Or on the other, on the eastern front of the Nazis, if you want to look at what happened with the Soviet Union, right? I mean, the Nazis launched a surprise attack on the Soviet Union, and at the beginning, the Soviets were unprepared,
right,
um, and it was very likely that they could have lost, right, if they didn't continue fighting, and they could have, just said, come on in. We don't have a fighting chance. We're going to lose a lot of lives.
right,
So we're just going to give you whatever you want, whatever you need, right? And so go with it. In the Armenian case, I mean, if we're going to apply that logic to the Armenian case, look, Azerbaijan has outspent the Armenian military for the past decade. They had Turkey that was helping them fight this war, although that was exaggerated, to be sure. But Turkey is one of the most powerful countries in the world militarily.
right.
Um, I mean, if the argument is that, well, we're not going to fight if there's the possibility that we're going to lose, then let's just wrap it all up, and move out, or let them in, or shut down the army. I mean, is that what the I mean, that's the logical conclusion, right? I mean, if that's all we're here
I
for.
mean, I would think that if that's really what was going to happen, if he knew from day one that we didn't have the capability to go against them, then maybe that's what a logical leader would have done. But I think that we did have the capability, and we did surrender. So I agree with you on that, and I don't believe that we should give up without a fight. But that's also my ideology, and I know not everybody agrees with that.
So one of the other things that's important to remember here is that, I mean, he was the one who was saying that we had a fight, or we
Right.
had a fighting chance, right? I mean, on the fourth day of the war, as has been repeated several times now, okay, the chief of staff told him that this is going to be a nasty war, right? So
Right.
he was informed about that, and he still didn't call it off. The Russians several times told him, uh, you know, let's stop the war now. You'll get to keep some of the land. You won't get to keep some of the rest of the land, and several thousand lives would have been saved. So if that was the concern, I mean, he could have done it weeks prior to when he actually did it. But he waited and he waited and he waited and he kept on calling volunteers. Right, that was the other thing. Right, I mean, we forget now that during the war, despite the fact that a general mobilization was announced by Pashinyan himself, he didn't actually activate that mobilization, and he kept calling for volunteers. The
Right.
question is why, right?
Was
I
it to
mean,
feed his ego? Was it because
no,
he
I don't.
didn't?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, part of it was definitely an egomaniacal thing, and we know that because apparently he fought a battle for Lele Tepe, which was this thing that he really wanted to uh, uh, achieve, right? Because Serge Sarkisian, it was like some sort of like
Right.
psychological competition going on in his head about him getting back Lele Tepe, and he sacrificed many lives for that. So that was definitely a matter of his ego. But besides that, I mean, you have to ask yourself why didn't he mobilize the army? Why was he calling for volunteers all throughout? When you have a trained military that's been training for this exactly, you're
Right.
calling volunteers who are unprepared, whose abilities are going to be limited by um, you know by the knowledge that they have prior to going to the front, which is how to shoot a machine gun for most of them, right? For a war that was being fought using artillery for the most part, and drones.
Right.
You're calling volunteers for what exactly? And he knew all of this, and he kept doing it, and he kept doing it, and he kept doing it. So you have to ask, at some point it begs the question, why do you keep doing that when you have the information telling you that uh, this is
Telling you
not
that.
this is not that type of war?
Right. And I mean, I'm sure many of us know volunteers that got called, boys that have never even served in the military or done that 2 year training that they do, military service. That's what was really shocking to me. I mean, it seems like he set us up for failure. And that's where I mean, personally for me, I felt there was treason.
Look, Jessica, I mean, the fact of the matter is that this is a person who has made no secret about what he thinks about Artsakh, right?
Right.
Um, he wrote articles about this in the late 90s. He wrote about it again in the 2000s. This is not a person who has ever considered Artsakh a part of Armenia. He's always seen it as a burden. Levon Terbedrosyan's presidential campaign in 2007, 2008 essentially used talking points that Nikol Pashinyan had developed in the previous 10 years through his newspaper,
Right.
which was wholly based on the idea that Gharabaghzis, right, as they called them, and the Gharabagh clan, right, were a bunch of criminals, okay, who had entered Armenia and taken
Right.
over the political space and needed to be removed. And I don't know how many people have seen this video, but there's a video of Nikol Pashinyan calling on the protesters in 2008 to rid Yerevan of the Gharabaghzi scum, right? So this is the person who now leads Armenia and who led Armenia on November 9th.
Right.
Why should it be surprising that he finally relieved Armenia and an Armenia that he has always seen without Karabakh or Artsakh of the problem that he has always believed that it has, which is
Yeah.
which is Artsakh or Karabakh.
I mean, I think the longer that he's staying in power, the more and more he's proving that he doesn't have Armenia's best interest at heart, and he doesn't, and he's not doing everything in his willpower to for the betterment of Armenia. But he still has some support, and that's what's really concerning to me. And I don't know if it's kind of, why do you think he still has support from people that clearly see the same things that we see? What do you think it is?
I've written about this a few times on Twitter and Facebook and on the Armonite. Uh, the fact of the matter is that uh, people like you and me and others who see what's happening for what it is are going up against folks who have uh, been exposed and bombarded and inundated for over 20 years with a complex, multifarious propaganda campaign, which has convinced them of all of these things. And even
Right.
prior to that, to be sure, okay, there are people who actually believe, what we were just talking about, which is that Karabakh or Artsakh is a burden. We shouldn't have to worry about that as Armenians. That they consider Karabakhzis and Artsakzis different people, and they just want to be rid of it. And if you add on top of that 20 years of propaganda, which has been initiated and carried on using millions of dollars pouring in from different parts of the world. Um, it's hard to overcome that
Right.
in a matter of 3 or 6 months or even a few years.
Does that make you worry about the upcoming elections?
I'm what elections?
Well, we're talking about elections, right? I mean, we heard last week Kocharyan's possible run, and
Hmm.
I know that made headlines. I know people had very strong feelings about that. What are your feelings about a Kocharyan run?
In a democratic system, anybody is able to participate, right? And
Right.
Nicola Guns love talking about democracy, although they seem less inclined to be open to it when they're confronted with options that they don't like. But the fact of the matter is that if Kocharyan decides that he wants to return to the field and participate in the elections, that's his right as an Armenian citizen. And frankly, I would welcome that. Robert Kocharyan is a hero. He's an Armenian hero who has done more for Armenia and the Armenian nation than many, many people in our recent history, and that's undeniable.
And in
And
what
they
way? When we say that, in what way do you say that? What has he
look,
give me like an example of something that he has
sure.
done?
He took over. He took over the country. He took over a really poor country where 600,000 people had emigrated. Right, in the first few years under the leadership of Levon Terbedrosyan, he had eliminated, uh, one of the largest diaspora organizations, or one of the largest organizations in the diaspora, the ARF, and all of its sister organizations, as a result, were alienated. And he took a country that was faltering, right? And he turned it around. There was an economic boom during the Kocharyan years, to the point where there were actually people returning. Thousands of Armenians returned to Armenia while Kocharyan was president. He re-engaged the diaspora in a way that, until that point in modern Armenian history, was unprecedented. Uh, he started laying the foundations, or I mean, he sort of strengthened the military that we have through the strong relationships that he developed with Russia, because he had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, who became the leader of Russia shortly after Kocharyan took power. So I mean, there were a lot of different a lot of different things that Kocharyan did. To say nothing of the fact that he is actually a recipient of the Hero of Artsakh Award. So he's a hero. He's a big H hero because he received the actual accolade officially, but he's also a hero in many other respects.
I mean, those are some really great points, obviously, and it just begs the question: why are people so against him, and what is the root of the corruption that they talk about? Because obviously that's the main point that they mention when they talk about Kocharyan, is we don't want to go back to corruption. So can you explain where that comes from?
I mean, honestly, I've been asking for years about this, and I'm still waiting for answers. You know, I asked this on Twitter several times, and I'm still waiting for answers. All the people who are really vociferously against Kocharyan and make claims about his corruption very rarely have any proof of that, which is odd to me, right? I mean, thousands of people read, you know, the things that I'm posting, and I've asked several times, you know, where's the proof of Kocharyan's corruption? And you know,
Right.
they'll post an article about, like, you know, one of his sons having some plot of land in some random village that nobody has ever heard of in Armenia, and they you know, they're bringing that as evidence of his corruption. And you know, it's actually kind of funny, because that proves my point, right? That they've essentially been brainwashed into thinking that, you know, a person like Kocharyan is corrupt because one of his family members owns a plot of land in some village unbeknownst to anybody. The fact of the matter is that, you know, the main charge against Kocharyan and his being corrupt is that he accumulated billions of dollars while he was president of Armenia. This actually does have a source. That source is in Armenia is Nikol Pashinyan, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
how fitting.
it is quite fitting. So in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I am, there was an article that was printed claiming that Robert Kocharyan has accumulated all sorts of money. Actually, it may have been at a later point, but the original source of the article is some tabloid in Russia. Okay, so they took a story that was in all likelihood bought and paid for in Russia, bought and paid for by an ally of Levon Bedrosian. They
Right.
reprinted it in Armenia, and then Nikol Pashinyan repeated it year after year until it became a truth,
Almost the truth, yeah.
right? No, it's not even almost the truth, because at this point, people will tell you that Robert Kocharyan is a billionaire who owns islands,
Right. I see that
and
all the time.
yeah, has bank accounts left and right, because of the money that he stole. I mean, you know, sometimes people make claims about him having more money than was in the Armenian state budget, you know, in the years that he was president. It's preposterous stuff. And
Right.
the fact of the matter is that whenever you ask questions about it, there is never, ever
So there's
actual
never been a
evidence.
receipt, there's never been anything that actually proved this. This has just been hearsay.
It's hearsay. I mean, you could look at different things. I mean, another popular reference is the Hetk article that a lot of people like to reference. If you look at that again, if you look at the actual text in the article, it says these are claims about business interests that Robert Kocharyan and his family have, which means nothing really. But
Right.
besides that, based on that, they say that he's a billionaire. I mean, how that is a logical conclusion from the baseless article that had published years ago, which they never followed up on, of course, is beyond me. But that requires critical thinking skills, which many of the people who are making that claim seem to lack.
Right. I mean, and we try to say that, we try to dismantle these rumors. However, it's taken a life of their own, and people are fearing this run. And like you said, people, it's a democratic process, so him running doesn't guarantee he's going to win. It's the will of the people at the end of the day. If he runs against Vasken Manukyan, who would you vote for? If you could vote, who would you vote for? If we had to choose between him and Vasken,
That would depend on what platform they propose. I think both of them are great candidates. I think both of them have a great deal of experience that they could bring to the table. I think both of them love their country and would do the best that they could do for Armenia. And it would be a difficult decision between
right?
the two. I think that it wouldn't be beneficial, frankly, if both of them were to run, because both of them have
Similar interests
that would potentially cancel each other out, and we don't want to have a situation like there is often in the United States with a third-party candidate, where you have
it takes away votes.
You take away votes. So I think what would be best is if they met together and they decided amongst themselves who the strongest candidate is going to be. I think in all of these unofficial polls that you've probably seen on Twitter and Instagram and Telegram and Facebook, there's a lot of people who are excited about the possibility of Robert Kocharyan coming back, and that's one of the things that I think scares Nigel supporters a lot.
Right. He does have support.
Which is why there's such a visceral reaction. One of the reasons why there is such a visceral reaction, because it scares them that somebody who is so opposed to their worldview, and ultimately it comes down, at least among the leadership, to a worldview, right? I mean, they have different ways of looking at how the world should be, right?
Right. And people were kind of hoping for a new candidate, somebody new. They didn't want anyone from the old oligarchs or Pashinyan. Do you think a new candidate would be safe for Armenia right now? And is there anyone that you know that could make a good prime minister for Armenia, if not for Robert Kocharyan or Vasken Manukyan?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure what the obsession is with the new.
Right.
It's always new. I mean, one of the reasons why we have that, honestly, is because of, again, the yellow journalism, by Nigel Pashinyan and others, which made these people out to be evil, right? I mean,
Right.
Robert Kocharyan and Serge Sarkisyan, according to Nigel Pashinyan and Levon Terbedrosyan and their supporters, are these evil people who need to be replaced. But you'd have to answer the question as to why that's the case. Why should they be replaced? I mean, generally, right, in a political system, especially in a fragile political system, you want to have experienced people who know the ropes, right? You don't want new people. And actually, in 2018. This is the most surprising and paradoxical part of all of that, is that in 2018 we got a brand new administration who had zero political experience. Nigel Pashinyan and his team had zero political experience, and we saw the results of that.
Right.
The results of that were an economy that's been destroyed. A war which we which we if we didn't lose on the battlefield, we lost in the back room that Nikol Pashinyan signed the capitulation agreement in. Uh, this was brought to us by the new, right? So why do we want the new again? I mean, in all functioning political systems, it's actually uh, perfectly normal to have people who have extensive political experience, and it's actually welcome, and that's what you want.
Absolutely. I mean, I watched Robert Kocharyan's first interview where he hadn't announced that he was running yet, and he was kind of championing Vasken Manukyan, and he was saying, um, we made a decision based on emotions when Nikol Pashinyan came, and emotions were high. And we saw the result of that. I mean, anyone that's gonna come as a prime minister now, it's not a gift from God. It's actually a huge burden to turn this country around. So, people that think that Kocharyan or whoever is gonna come in power are doing it for their own benefit, it's kind of sad and untrue, because there's just so much damage repair to be done. So I want to put
It's
that
a
out there. It's not
yeah.
an easy job, and they know that they're going to be blamed for everything that's going to be going on going forward, right? So the fact that somebody is willing to run again after having the whole country criticize him for the last 2.5 years, to me, shows great patriotism.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. In almost all post-war situations, you have a very difficult. I mean, even in situations where the side is victorious, it's very difficult politically. You had, I mean, Winston Churchill, who won World War II, right? Or one of the main figures of World War II was. Had a terrible time politically, domestically, after the war was over, right? And I mean, you had the same situation with Ulysses S. Grant, who was a war hero um, in the United States. On the winning side, I mean, he won the war for the Union, and he was known as being a terrible president at the time, right? At the time, because of
Right.
the domestic situation. I mean, he has I think, fortunately regained some of his status and reputation because he actually did do good things. And history is the best judge, as so many have said. And you have this situation over and over and over again in uh, political history. So somebody who is willing to take on the leadership when a side has lost, right, effectively, uh,
Right.
I mean, it's going to be a thankless job. You have at least 5,000 of our best men who were killed. Um, you have tens of thousands who were wounded. You have POWs. All these people have families, right? I mean, so you're talking about potentially a few 100,000 uh, families. I'm sorry, a few 100,000 people in the country that have been affected. You're going to have a terrible time economically. By all accounts, there's going to be a wave of emigration that we haven't seen in years. I mean, you're going to be taking on a really terrible political situation.
Absolutely.
I think this is the last political situation where you would want to have somebody new who doesn't know what they're doing.
I agree 100%. I mean, what would Armenia look like if, let's take two situations. If Pashinyan were to stay in power, how do you see the future of Armenia? And if Kocharyan ends up becoming prime minister, how do you see the future of Armenia? And I just want to say one thing, because I see a lot of questions that are popping up. Um, there's going to be a moment where I'm going to read all the questions that you have for William, depending on his time, and we're gonna go through them. But I really want to know, how do you see the future of Armenia if Pashinyan stays in power or if Kocharyan takes over?
Well, I'll take the first one first. I don't know of any situations where a country has been in such a humiliating position, and a side has signed the capitulation agreement, after which that side, that political force, stays in power and expects to do anything of any value. We have no status internationally to negotiate on, and we've seen that, right? I mean, the Pashinyan government has shown itself to be incredibly and wholly ineffective when it concerns returning the prisoners of war, okay, who are still in Azerbaijan right now, including a woman, right? At least one woman that we know about. I don't even want to think about what is happening to them, okay, based on some of the videos that I've seen, and I'm sure some of the people who are watching now have seen.
Right.
And the Pashinyan government is fully responsible for their state and for their well-being, and they have not been able to deliver, and those people are now suffering, and their families are suffering because of that. I mean, that's just one thing. I mean, we're not talking about their ability to negotiate with potential investors in the country. These people have alienated so many people within the country and within the diaspora. And we have to keep in mind that almost everybody in the Armenian world has called for their resignation, right?
Right.
The Armenian Church has called for their resignation. AGBU has called for the resignation. Russian business leaders have called for Pashinyan's resignation. I mean, how do they expect to attract the resources that would be required in order to maintain a viable state? I mean, we've seen that they're unable to do it, so I don't even know why this is a serious question.
Right.
I mean, we were saying months ago that they're going to be unable to do it. We know now that they have been unable to do it. I mean, how much longer are we going to wait until we get rid of them, okay, and bring in somebody who can salvage what remains? As far as Kocharyan is concerned, again, I mean, I will say what I said before. He's one of the most experienced political people in Armenia. He has great relationships with the Russian Armenian community. He has great relationships with Russia and the Russian leadership. I'm focusing here on Russia because the focus for the past 2.5 years and maybe even longer than that has been on everywhere but Russia. And we saw the consequences of that. The fact of the matter is that most of our investment, most of our trade, most of our strategic relationships, whether it's in the military or economic spheres, are with Russia. So you need somebody who has a good relationship with them.
Do you think
on the high level and the low level?
Do you think that Pashinyan's disdain for Putin and that affected the results of how much Russia helped us or didn't help us during the war? Do you think it would have been a different outcome had it been Kocharyan, which had a great relationship with Putin? Do you think we would have gotten more help?
Look, I don't think there is any question about that. I think a lot of politics is done behind closed doors, and it depends on the relationships that you have with people. I mean, this isn't any sort of, again, this is not a secret. While Putin was waiting for a phone call from Pashinyan, Pashinyan was was dialing up Macron and I don't know who else, trying to figure out what they can do. And this is your strategic partner. This is a person with whom you have a direct line. And let's not forget, for some reason, in this conversation, the Armenian political conversation, we seem to forget what Russia is, right? Russia is the largest country in the world, right? It has thousands of nuclear weapons. It has one of the most powerful militaries in the world. It has one of the largest economies in the world. I mean, what are we talking about here? Why don't we want a good relationship with Russia? And the fact of the matter is that, you know, a lot of it comes down to, again, this Western minded group of Armenians, Western-oriented group of Armenians, you know, which see Russia again as, you know, they see, many of them see Artsakh as a burden, right? They
Right.
see it as a something to get rid of instead of something to embrace, and we've suffered because of it. And
Absolutely.
mind you, I would like to point out that despite all of this, despite all the slaps in the face, despite the fact that Pashinyan appointed to very high positions and low positions, you know, people who had made very clear their disdain for Russia, despite that, Russia still offered to help on a number of different occasions, and it was
And we
refused.
refused. Yeah. I honestly, I learned a lot from the interviews from Robert Kosharyan, and I was absolutely shocked to know that we could have ended this on the third day or fourth day of the war. And for anyone that asked me, when do you like, why do you think this is treason? It was, I could just take that and run with it. The fact that we could have put a stop to this on the third or fourth day, but we decided not to, and we decided to send untrained 18-year-olds on the front lines to fight drones. It could be as simple as that. So, William, before we take questions, I wanted to ask you, because I see your, obviously, your tweets and the rhetoric that kind of that's being spread on Twitter, and it's kind of like you feel like there's a fight between the liberal, quote unquote liberals, because some nationalist Armenians can also be liberals, right? Like personally, I'm a nationalist when it comes to Armenia, but I do hold a lot of liberal values. But I want to know, what are you trying to achieve with your tweets? What are you trying to achieve with your social media presence, whether it's on Facebook or on Twitter? And why do you think it's important for us to keep having these conversations on online platforms? And how could that change anything, or does it even affect anything that's going on in Armenia?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the question of whether or not social media makes a difference is evident in, you know, any number of uh, elections or political movements over the past you know, decade at least. The fact is that social media is the main platform from which, or main space from which most people in the developed world get their information, right? Most people go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, which I'm not as familiar with, but from what I understand, a lot of people get their information from Instagram. And you know, most news organizations these days, you know, from the largest ones like the New York Times to the smallest ones like the Armenite, have to go through Facebook. They have to go through Instagram. They have to go through Twitter. And so, you know, social media is incredibly important in getting any sort of information out. So that there's no question about that. And whether or not that's good is a wholly different issue, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be more frequently discussed in the forthcoming years, because you know, people are realizing that, wait a second, maybe it's not good to have, you know, every manner of opinion you know, swaying people's decisions about what to do, whether, you know, it's who to vote for or who to support in a revolution or whatever it is, right? I mean, it could be a very dangerous tool too, and a lot of people who actually worked on creating these social media platforms have started coming out and saying this. So that's that. As far as the you know, my objectives, you know, in every era, people have used whatever platforms are available to them, whether it's a soapbox or the printing press, or a pamphlet, or a newspaper, or TV, or whatever it is, to get the word out about what they think is um, important, right? And my hope is that in doing what I'm doing, um, people will be convinced of the point that I'm making, and it'll encourage them to become more actively engaged in the discourse, and ultimately affect the course of our nation, which is the ultimate point, right?
Right.
My goal is the preservation and thriving of the Armenian nation. That's my goal. And I
Absolutely.
hope to contribute to that through the social media platforms and, of course, the other activity that I do.
Well, I think you do a great job at it.
Thank you.
I think most of us think that. What do you say to the people that paint you out with a very, very ugly brush sometimes, and you know, and they paint nationalism with a bad brush? What do you say to those people, and what is a misconception that they have about you and about nationalism as a whole?
My response to them would be to pay attention. I think a lot of times, based on the responses and the things that I see them writing, they don't really pay attention to what I'm saying or what I'm writing.
Right.
Um, and that's where a lot of the message gets lost. Um, I think that as far as nationalism is concerned, uh, I'm an Armenian nationalist for one reason, and that is because I firmly believe that it is the way that the Armenian nation is going to be preserved and it's going to thrive, as I said. Uh, I don't
So what does that
believe
entail? What does being a nationalist entail?
that means embracing our culture for what it is. That means being cautious of the influences that bombard it with things that have nothing to do with Armenian culture, have nothing to do with Armenian tradition, and it is to more than anything else the first thing. And this is actually something that I wrote on the Armenite as far as what the Armenite's principles are, and that is to prioritize the interests of the Armenian nation before all else. Okay, that's what it means
Absolutely.
to be a nationalist. It's to prioritize the Armenian nation before and its interests before all other interests, and that's what it comes down to. And there is not this, this is always sort of twisted into, well, you're being discriminatory or whatever it is. It's like, this is what all groups do, right? This is just a fact of life, and for a nation that's as small as ours, and frankly, which is currently as weak as ours, there is no other way of preserving what we have. There's just no other way, right? If we don't prioritize what our interests are as a nation, right, which is to have a nation state, to have a strong military, to protect that nation state, which is to have a strong economy, which prioritizes the interests of the participants in that economy who are Armenian, right, and not, for example, welcoming foreigners to take over the economy. Uh, we can
I
very
agree.
easily be lost, and that's the paradigm that I'm talking about. That's different between what I believe, what nationalists believe, and what um, somebody like Pashinyan and his supporters believe. They have
Right.
a much more global uh, perspective on things, and that's the perspective that prevails today. Frankly, right? Nationalism is a bad word. It's a bad word in the United States. It's a bad word in Europe. It's a bad
And
word
it's
pretty much
strange to
everywhere.
me because when we grow up, I mean, I know for myself, like I went to Armenian school my whole life. I grew up in the Agum, and I I would think most Armenians were nationalists growing up. I mean, I if you weren't a nationalist, it was kind of like amot not to be nationalist. And right now, when we say we're nationalists, we're it's oftentimes painted as like we're racist or we're just not progressive enough. And I always try to explain to people that one has nothing to do with the other. Being nationalist does not mean you're racist, does not mean that you're not progressive in different types of subjects. It just means that, like you said, putting Armenia's interests first. And to me, it seems like the first way to do that is not to have an open dialogue about peace with the enemies while we still have pals in captivity while Turkey and Azerbaijan are conducting military drills, and we're talking about peace with the enemy, which is and starting trade with them and business. I mean,
Right.
I don't think that's such a controversial stance, but it seems like in 2021 it's controversial to not side with the enemy, which is extremely scary to me.
Again, I think here there's a very curious phenomenon uh, when it concerns our relationship with Turkey and Azerbaijan. I mean, these are countries that have officially not made any secret about their intentions, about Armenians. I mean, if you look at the things that Aliyev was writing before the war, I mean,
Right.
right, for years. The policies of Turkey of essentially erasing Armenian. I mean, not essentially. They're erasing Armenian culture and the evidence of Armenians on their land today. Okay, what is now their land, officially, right? Um, they're whitewashing it. They're making it disappear. They're changing the names of things in the country,
Right.
and they have been doing it for years, for decades. And we're supposed to sit back and look at this and say, maybe if we take the first step, maybe they'll come around. Well, why is that our responsibility,
Right.
right? Why, Turkey is a country of what, 60, 70 million people. And why is it our responsibility to take that step? Why isn't it their responsibility to do that? Why isn't it their responsibility to take all of the ruins of our churches and monasteries that we were eliminated from by official policy just barely, 100 years ago, and now, lay in ruins, right? And
Right.
everybody, points to Surkhach in Akhtamar Island, which, mind you, was renovated as a tourist attraction. But not far from there are ruins of Armenian churches and monasteries throughout the land, right? And that policy, that essentially the propaganda that the Turks do for the international community, a lot of Armenians
Right.
uh,
Fall for it.
swallow, gobble up like, like it was created for them.
Absolutely.
It's you know one of the sort of defining characteristics of intellectuals is that, um, or people who like to consider themselves intellectuals, is they look at reality and they don't want to accept it, right? They want to see what's going on behind the scenes. Sometimes, a duck is just a duck, right? It's not a machine. It's not a puppet. It's just what it is, right? It's just what you see, right? And what I see is a genocidal country, okay, who hasn't admitted its genocide. I see another country which talks about committing genocide regularly, right? And we're supposed to sit here and dialogue with these people. I don't accept
Right.
that premise.
I don't either, and it really saddens me that we've gotten to the place where we're actually talking about this. When for 45 days we were screaming how we don't want peace with the with the enemies and we want to win, and now 3 months later, it's like not only did we surrender our land, but we're surrendering everything that we stood for. I hope.
It's funny though, right? I mean, sorry to interrupt you,
No.
Jessica, but for 44 days, we were being told by Pashinyan himself and his team that they're committing another genocide. This is another Sardarabad. Is this is a matter of life or death. If we don't fight, if we don't do this, they're going to kill us. They're gonna raze us to the ground. And just a few months later, they want to open everything up as though nothing happened.
That's the most shocking.
How
I mean,
there are people who are buying it, right? How is it that 1 second they are talking about these countries committing genocide against us, and the next, all of a sudden, we're supposed to be friends?
how do we change that? How do we change the minds of Armenians that are even thinking like that's okay? I mean, how do we change that without sounding like we're fascists or like being painted out to be fascists? Anytime that, I mean, obviously, what I've realized is Twitter is a very dangerous place. Sometimes when we're high on emotions, we might tweet something and not word it correctly, and then that's taken out of context and paint us out to be something completely that we're not. But in reality, we're just reacting to the obvious treason that's happening right now. And when I say treason, I'm not only talking about Pashinyan, I'm talking when I look at my fellow Armenians that are okay with having these conversations and okay with, surrendering who we are just to seem more globalist and more accepting and progressive. I mean, I feel like I'm being betrayed by my people. And when you call that out, then you're painted out to be a fascist and to be, obviously, we have a reputation, William. So how do you explain to them that that's not where you're coming from, and where we're coming from is out of love and fear for Armenia, and that they should do the same?
I mean, again, as with any of that. First of all, I don't pay much attention to the folks who just are going to, lob, nasty names and things like that. If you're going to call somebody a fascist, then you have to substantiate that with something, right?
Right.
What is fascistic about what I've said or you've said? What is it exactly? That Armenia needs to have a strong military, that the Armenian state or the Armenian states should be defended at all costs for the survival of the Armenian nation. I mean, what's interesting is that there's a lot of people, a lot of these folks, a lot of these liberals who will complain and criticize, people like me, people like you, other nationalists. They might, criticize somebody like Garegin Nezhde, a hero of mine, for whatever, any number of things, or maybe they just, don't have any details, but they'll call him names like they call everybody else names. But the fact of the matter is that the only reason why there's an Armenia today is because of nationalists. Okay, there is no question about that. Okay, Armenia exists because of nationalists. Okay, Armenia wouldn't have existed in 1918 if it wasn't for nationalists. It wouldn't exist today if it weren't for nationalists. And the reason why those people have a country to talk about and debate with me about and debate with you about and call us names about is because of people like us. That's the great irony in all of this, right? Is that if it weren't for nationalists, okay, those folks who were talking about, well, wouldn't it be better if we, just retreated and we didn't fight and we didn't do this or we didn't do that? Why do you guys keep, talking about the military? I mean, they're the same people who wouldn't be able to be sitting in Yerevan as an Armenian city if it weren't for people like us. So
Absolutely.
I approach that with, again, um, caution at the very least.
I agree. And one more thing before I get to the questions, but why has the word Tashnag become such a slur on, all platforms? Why are we not allowed to use that word without it being equated to fascism or to war-loving
Beats me.
monsters?
Uh, um, the ARF, I Tashnag, Dashnag, the ARF, any number of things. Um, the the fact is that uh, the ARF, the way that I look at it is, uh, it's a huge target, right? And it's a huge target because it does so much, right? You can't hit something that is not there, right? So all the people who don't do anything aren't on the field to be shot at, right?
Right.
So the ARF is always on the field, okay, and they're not always successful, right? There's a lot
No.
of things that they haven't done right, and trust me, I've got my criticisms about it, an extensive list of criticisms about the ARF, which I share with my uh, uh, ARF friends. But the fact of the matter is that the reason that the ARF gets attacked all the time, and they're called names all the time, is because they do so much, and that's undeniable, right? People criticize the ARF, and they've gone to ARF schools. Um, People criticize the ARF. They grew up in AYF, or they went to Homenetmen when they were growing up. People criticize the ARF. They don't realize that the reason that there is a country in the first place is because the Arab picked up the mantle and moved to Yerevan, okay, in
Right.
1918 when nobody else was willing to do it. Uh, you know, there's lots of different reasons that also influence that. For example, the Arab was subject to a massive, decades-long, almost century-long propaganda campaign, by the Soviet Union. That influenced a lot of people who then ended up uh, influencing others. It's just, and there's also, of course, the disgruntled ARFers who grew up in ARF, who owe their nationalistic, not even nationalistic ideas, the fact that they're Armenian or involved in the Armenian world to the ARF and to ARF schools, and have turned their backs on the ARF, and now
Right.
live and work, some of them in Armenia, some of them elsewhere. But uh, they're hypocrites, they're ingrates, and it's unfortunate that they're unwilling to be honest with themselves and with the people who listen to them.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally saw firsthand, I mean, just like many people, especially being from the diaspora and being a Western Armenian, we know that in the last 100 years, I mean, it was ARF that held the diaspora together and that created schools and churches and community centers. You don't have to agree with every single thing that they do as a political party, but you cannot deny that the work that they put into day in and day out for the preservation of our culture. Um, I mean, most of my family, they're not even, Tashnak Sagans. I mean, some of them were registered Hinchaks or whatever, but I was sent to an ARF school and I saw firsthand, I mean, the love that Tashnaks have for Armenia. I mean, it's just not something that I ever saw anything that was even comparable in the diaspora. And I tweeted something not too long ago that became extremely controversial, and I know people use that tweet often when they're quote tweeting me, and I just wanted to take a moment to explain it. I had tweeted that there are two types of people that don't like Tashnags: Turks and people that empathize with Turks. And I know that people lost it over that tweet, and I wanted to explain what that means. Being a Tashnak for me is not about following a specific political party, but it's about the ideology behind Tashnak Tutun, which is to put Armenia first, to be a nationalist. So many people, I mean, if you like Karakinishte, if you like Monte Melkonyan, if you like all of our freedom fighters that have been fighting to protect our lands, then you probably don't hate Tashnak Sutyun. You just have a wrong idea about what being a Tashnak is. So there's nobody that hates Tashnaks more than Turks, and this is where I was coming from, because it was kind of my response to Neil Hauer when he made fun of Tashnaks from Glendale. And this is someone
Is that
that
the guy who
didn't
wanted
know.
to behead me? Is that him?
Right, that's him.
Right.
So that guy didn't know what a Tashnak was 4 months ago. And here he is talking down on an organization that has done so much for our culture. And my tweet was responding to that because, and it wasn't to say that if you're an Armenian that's not ARF, that I think you're a Turk or that you're a Turk sympathizer. And it's to say that the ideology of Tashnak Tuchun, the doctrine, is to put Armenia first. And if you're not willing to put Armenia first, then you are a sympathizer with the enemy. And I don't see anything wrong with that, but I just wanted to clarify that. So
Thank you for doing so. I think that's a reasonable way of putting it, especially given those experiences. You know, it's funny. It's not that funny actually, because at the end of the day, it has to do with the well-being of our nation. But the fact that somebody from anywhere can come to our homeland and disparage the political party that's been around the longest and who has done, frankly, the most as a political party in modern Armenian history, and be welcomed by other Armenians, whatever their political persuasion is very disappointing. And I think those Armenians require a bit of introspection, because to welcome and to encourage Frank. I mean, the fact of the matter is that he said that because some Armenians told him that, right? And he felt comfortable repeating that, and that's unacceptable, right? It's unacceptable to say that about one of the most storied, if not the most storied, Armenian political party in modern Armenian history. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people are asking, can we separate Tashnaks as a political party and a cultural center? Because the real problem here is the two are combined. I mean, you can separate the ideology from the political party, but I still don't think the political party has done anything that's been so detrimental to Armenia. So, I mean, every political party has their faults and has their weaknesses and things that they can do better. But as a whole, what I see is that ARF, at least in the last few months, have been very vocal about having volunteers that are still ready to go on the battlefield and fight for the protection of our borders. And I mean, if you don't respect anything, you could at least respect that.
It's the ARF is, I think I've written this before somewhere else. The Armenian nation's favorite whipping boy, right? Whenever you need somebody to blame, and there's the Karnik song, "Meravore Tashnak," right? It doesn't matter. You can just blame the ARF, and you'll always have somebody supporting you, which is ridiculous, right? During this past war in 2016, okay, I'm aware of many, and in every situation where Armenia needed to be defended, the ARF and its members have been at the ready, whether it's going to the front line, whether it's organizing communities that they're in, whatever it may be. Okay, and again, like I said, many of the folks that we see now who are either the loudest critics of the ARF or who encourage and promote the loudest criticisms of the ARF have in some way, come been cut from that cloth, but have essentially lost their way. And it's not terribly surprising. I guess Satan was God's favorite angel, right?
Right. That's a good way to put it. So, William, do you have time to take a few questions that I have
Sure,
here in
sure,
the
yeah.
box?
Feel free. Feel free.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go through the questions with the ones that kind of don't look similar to what I asked. Um, should a future new government close down Facebook temporarily? I guess they're maybe referencing Pashinyan's Facebook activity. What do you think about his presence on social
Look,
media?
well, I mean, it's Pashinyan's Facebook activity as an individual, but also the vast amount of fake accounts that are operated by his team, right? So thousands of fake accounts are operated by Pashinyan's team. This is not a secret, and that influences public opinion. And I think, frankly, that to have an assessment of, to have a period where we can assess the influence that Facebook has on Armenian public opinion and what influence we want it to have, right? Just like any other platform, is a reasonable proposition. Where there's a period of time where Armenia decides and Armenia's government decides how it wants to manage Facebook. Okay,
Right.
Facebook is a creation for it was created ostensibly to have university students be able to connect with each other, and now it's morphed into this Frankenstein monster that everybody recognizes can be very problematic, right? And this is across the board. This is not just in Armenia, right? This is also in the
Right.
United States, in Europe, and elsewhere. So I don't think it's unreasonable to take a period of time and decide, what impact we want Facebook to have and how we're going to manage that, right? I don't think it's unreasonable, for example, to say that people should have one account per person, right? I don't think it's unreasonable to say that fake, deceptive information shouldn't be published online. Is that unreasonable? I mean, it's not unreasonable when it concerns certain political interests in the
I don't
Western
think it's
world. Why should yeah.
unreasonable, but I mean, I know that personally, I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, this conversation came up also when Donald Trump's Twitter got suspended. I was for it personally because I'm not a fan of his, and it's not only because I'm not a fan of his, because that would be, that's not a good enough reason, but because I felt like we get suspended as individuals for a tweet that could sound like, hateful, and he had, many of those tweets, and, he was still using a public platform, but people had major concern about censorship, whether they support him or not. They felt that, social media platforms being able to control the narrative. And when you talk about, not being able to post something that's like untruthful or to, put out false information, how do they measure that? Who are the bodies that are going to be measuring that? Is that, against freedom of speech? Does that violate any type of constitutional rights?
These are all important questions, and I think what's important ultimately, again, as a nationalist, to ask is what is in the best interest of the nation, right? These concepts that we have, like freedom of expression, fine, okay, that's it's a nice sounding concept, but if freedom of expression leads to the destruction of your country, is that acceptable to you? right? Are we going to accept the idea that, Perfect TV, which is I think it's the most popular YouTube channel, if not the most popular, then the second most popular, which just, it publishes garbage, right? It's just false
Right.
information constantly, right? Is that acceptable, right? Like, are we willing to let it operate as a platform from which people get information that they believe, if that is going to lead to the eventual demise of Armenia as a state? If we are, then I don't know what to say.
Right.
If we're not, then we have to figure out a way of managing that. And unfortunately, this laissez-faire uh, attitude to any sort of information that's put out there is destructive. It's corrosive, right? And we've seen the consequences of that. Are we going to allow the next Nikol Pashinyan, okay, to put out into the ether that some other uh, uh, politician or hero, Armenian hero, has billions of dollars or has done this, that, or the other thing? Are we willing to do that and allow the defamation of character that leads to those people's exclusion from the political space, which then leads to the ascent to power of a yellow journalist who,
Right.
who spread that sort of information that then runs the country into the ground? I mean, I personally don't think that that's acceptable, and I don't think anybody who is in their right mind would be willing to accept that. And I think um, that is pretty broadly applicable, even outside of Armenia.
So outside of Armenia, when I know that you live in the United States, and I know this live is about Armenia, but I was curious to know, and I saw a few questions that are asking, um, in as an American, do you vote liberal or do you vote Republican? You vote Democrat or Republican?
That
I mean, if you
is
want to share that.
private.
Okay.
Yeah. But frankly, look, I spent a lot of time in Democratic politics when I was first getting involved in politics, and where I started and where it is now is very different.
Right.
I have changed my views considerably on how you know the political space is and what my beliefs are. Or actually, my beliefs haven't changed too much. I just have realized that the bifurcation has become more extreme. And I think that, again, this isn't any sort of secret. A lot of people have written about how radicalized the various political sides have become. And
Right.
frankly, my primary concern for the past decade has been Armenian politics.
Have you ever
And I'm
thought about
here,
going into Armenian
and
politics?
I'm going into Armenian politics. Um, I
I
think
mean, I know many people
if
are asking that. I mean, is that something you would consider?
I'll put it this way, I have spent the better part of the past decade, at least the past decade, serving my nation in every way that I have been able. And if in the future there's another opportunity to serve my nation that involves being involved in politics, then that's what I'll do.
That's amazing. And it's good to know. I'm just going
And
through
by the
the
way,
questions.
I'm as far as being in America, the stay is temporary.
You're looking to possibly repatriate?
I mean, I did repatriate with my wife, who actually lived there or moved there before I did, even, and we returned temporarily so that she could do her PhD in Armenian studies.
That's amazing. I mean, honestly, there's no doubt how much work you put into, everything you do for Armenia. And I'm personally very proud to know you through social media, and to hear your voice. And it gives me hope for our future. It gives me hope that there are still people that think like this, that there are still people that are willing to put Armenia first. One more question before
Thank you.
we go. What do you think about Armenians that want to have a public dialogue with Azeris on social media?
I think they should spend their time reading Armenian books instead.
That's a good answer.
I
William,
you know, I think those people, unfortunately, have uh, little idea about who they're dealing with or what our predicament is. They're very idealistic, which I can't. I understand the idealism, right? I
right,
understand the wish for peace.
right,
I understand that people prefer peace. The fact is that this is the hand that we've been dealt. Okay, this is the geography that we've been dealt. This is the geography and the land and the fate that God has granted us, and we have to make do within the confines of that reality. Okay, we can wish all we want that we live in the middle of Europe or we live in the middle of North America, but the fact of the matter is we don't. Okay, Armenia is in a rough part of the world. It's surrounded by people, okay, who have made no secret about their intention to destroy us, and they've done quite a good job. Okay, because the land upon which uh, Armenians lived for thousands of years has shrunk considerably just in the past 100 years. And the fact is that we need to realize this, and frankly, many people much smarter than me, much better aware of who our neighbors are and who those people are, have written up that over and over and over again. And we can pretend like they didn't exist. We can
right.
pretend like the things they wrote didn't exist. We can pretend like our history doesn't exist. We can pretend like our current geopolitical situation doesn't exist, but that doesn't change reality. The reality remains the same. And the reality is that we need to have a strong country with an extremely powerful military, and we need to prioritize the interests of the Armenian nation in order for us to survive and thrive.
Absolutely, I agree. And are you afraid of the possibility that we might lose more land in the upcoming years? Are you afraid of the possibility of a new war?
I always expect there to be a war. Again, given our circumstances as a country, given our position, everyone should expect there to be a war sometime in the future. I don't know whether that'll be tomorrow, whether it'll be 5 years from now, or a decade or two from now. But the fact of the matter is that we need to always be prepared for war. I mean, look, countries that have not had a war in decades or even centuries prepare for war, right?
Right.
There's a reason why every Swiss household has a gun in the house issued by the government, along with bullets issued by the government. It's so they can defend themselves in the case of a war. This idea that war is beyond, no longer a possibility is preposterous, and it's precisely this sort of thinking that leads us into the complacency that we were in, or many people were in, despite warnings. despite perpetual warnings that, guys, look, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared. And, you know, a lot of different organizations and a lot of individuals pretended like this wasn't a reality, right? They spent our resources, they spent our time, they spent um, our human capital on peace dialogues and you know, peace programs when we should have been steeling ourselves for the fight that was to come. So
And how do we
I'm
do
not
that
afraid of
now?
it, but I need to prepare for it.
How do we prepare for it now if we don't have the financial capabilities and if the enemies seem like they have an endless amount of weaponry and resources and we're relying on mostly Russia, really? Um, what do we do so that we could get to a place where we're able to face them with equal amount of ammunition?
See, this is, I mean, it's not a,
I know it's not a simple answer. I mean,
yeah, it's not so black and white in the sense that, you know, if we were to be fighting, you know, Azerbaijan one on one, you know, I think first of all the results of this war would have been very different, and the planning for the future would be very different. But this is where the political element comes into play. Our relationships with Russia and other strategic partners comes into play. Our relationship with Iran, which was also, I mean, not something that we really talked about, but which was also, uh, you know, significantly damaged because the current administration, you know, the Nikol Pashinyan government decided that they're going to open an embassy in Israel, which
right.
served little actual diplomatic purpose, uh, and alienated Iran. So I mean, there are different ways of doing it. I mean, you have countries like Singapore, for example, which are, you know, which are tiny, right? Singapore is one of the few, you know, city states that remains in the world, and they have one of the most powerful, highly militarized societies in the world. And why do they have that? Because they're surrounded by much larger and often much stronger countries, okay, that could, if they really wanted to, uh, destroy them, swallow them up. And the founder of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, had this concept that he developed, military concept, which was to turn Singapore into a poison pill, so that if anybody were to attack, okay, it would be more damaging to them than they could
Right.
be damaging, or that they would gain from, you know, attacking and, you know, potentially occupying Singapore. So there's different concepts that we could adopt, or
Right.
we could even develop our own. But the fact is that, look, I mean, this is just our reality. Do
You
we
have to
want
have
to
a
deal?
leader that wants to put, effort in developing those.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had done that, right? I mean,
Right.
Robert Kocharian, Vazgen Sarkisyan, Robert Kocharian, Vazgen Manukyan, for that matter, Ser Sarkisyan, okay, who we didn't talk much about, but also instrumental, you know, another hero of the Armenian nation
Right.
who has been defamed over the past 20 years by Nikol Pashinyan and others, okay, built a country with a strong military, which was prepared, which was on the right track to dealing with the threats and the geopolitical realities of Armenia. But in 2.5 years, I mean, it was largely dismantled. Right? We
Absolutely.
had the relationships were dismantled. I mean, we could talk about the details. Of course, I've written a lot about this recently, especially. But these are these are things that take time to build up. And if you have an idea of what that's supposed to be, if you have a plan and you have dedicated people, it's possible. And we had done that. And that's why for 25 years we didn't have a devastating war, right? We had skirmishes, we had battles, but we survived and we thrived. We really were thriving. I mean, it was a golden age in
Absolutely.
modern Armenian history.
Absolutely. I think we didn't realize that until now, right? I mean, everybody always thinks the grass is always greener, and as we saw, that was not the case. That's why I think that, the current, well, if there are to be any like elections coming up, I think people really should put their feelings aside about what they've heard about Kocharyan or Vascan, Manukyan, or whoever's running, and just really put Armenia's foreign policy interests first, put Armenia's safety first, rather than, our emotions. So I think that's why voices like you are so important, because I remember right after the trilateral agreement, being on social media and even talking against Pashinyan would get someone canceled, whereas now the general sentiment has changed, and we see he lost a lot more support, and I know it has a lot to do with obviously his continuous treasonous actions, but also because of people like you that have been just really vocal and putting out actual facts and statements, and it has changed people's perspective. So I really commend you for doing that, honestly, and your work is truly appreciated. I really
Thank you.
suggest everyone here, if you're on Twitter, please follow William Bairamian. It's at Bairamian on Twitter. So I'll be writing it in my story. You could follow him. I'll put his information. Is there anywhere else that they can follow you other than the Armonite, obviously, Twitter, and are you open on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm also on Facebook. Same. It's just Bairamian.
Perfect.
Facebook.com/Bairamian, and I write on there too. So if anybody's
Perfect.
interested, they can follow me on Facebook as well.
I'm gonna put
And
all that
I'd like to take
information.
this opportunity to thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the opportunity, and you do great work, and I appreciate your presence online as well. Uh,
Thank you,
and
William.
please keep up the good work, and also don't let them get you down. I know people write all sorts of nasty things. We see that. You see that. You do a great job of handling it. I'd like to encourage others who are watching and listening and reading that they also shouldn't be discouraged. It's very difficult, I think, in this day and age to withstand the onslaught. But you're an exemplar in that regard, in that you don't let them get to you, and you shouldn't let them get to you. Don't let them silence you. It's your right to be able to say what's on your mind, and you should embrace that. And I commend you likewise, and wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add, William, before we go?
Thank you to everybody who was watching, and if you have questions, please send them over. Maybe I'll be able to get to them sometime soon.
Maybe, hopefully, we'll try to convince William to also be more active on Instagram. I know a lot of people use this platform, but I know he's probably overwhelmed with all the different platforms that he's already on.
Yeah, I'm an old man when it concerns all this stuff. So I know my wife Nora reposts some of my stuff. So maybe you can follow her if you need updates from me.
Absolutely.
But I'll try to get more active. I'll see what I can do.
Thank you so much, William. Thank you for your time. Honestly,
Thank you.
you're honestly the best person that I could have had, and I think that you're making all the difference. So thank you, and say thank you to
Thank you.
Nora too. And I hope
Thank you.
we'll get to speak again soon.
I hope so too. You take care.
You too. Bye, William.
All right. Bye bye.